take you through a step-by-step process of how I make my campfire bread. I know it's been in the vlog a few times, but I'll actually go through each ingredient, how we mix it, how we do everything. So maybe you can make it at home for yourself. Hey vlog, so as promised, this morning I'm going to do a tutorial on how I make my bread. So this is my Campfire Dutch oven bread. I like it because it is super simple. It's really easy to make. It's a no knead recipe, so you don't have to knead the bread out. And so far it's been pretty well foolproof. There's only, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 ingredients to the whole bread. And I do like it because if you're planning on making this, like if you are camping, you can make like the dry mix all up and just have it sitting there, just add water and you're all done. So today I'm actually making a double batch. So this is going to go in my big Dutch oven. The only reason I'm using a pot to mix this in is because I don't have a bowl big enough otherwise to take it. So you don't need to use a pot, there's no reason for the pot. So in here, so like I said, I'm making double batch. So if you want to, obviously, you know, if you're using a smaller Dutch oven, just halve it and you'll have the regular quantity. So I'm using 6 cups of bread flour. I'm using bread flour because I've got it. You don't need to use bread flour. You can just use normal plain flour. The only difference is with bread flour, it does a little bit more protein and gluten already in the flour to help the bread, but it's not necessary. Alright, so all you do is you get your 6 cups of your flour, and then in here you want to add 1 teaspoon of yeast and 3 teaspoons of salt. One little note on salt. It does need the salt. It is a salty bread, not super salty, but you can definitely taste it is slightly saltier than regular bread. Because of the way this rises, and it's a slow rise, it does need that salt. So don't go reducing that down any less than what it is. And also one note on salt, I've used cooking salt, which is what you should use. If you are going to use table salt when you make bread or just for anything, if you're using table salt, reduce the amount down by about 1/4 because it's finer, so it packs more salt in. So anyway, so once the dry ingredients are all there, I usually just give it a bit of a whisk together, just to mix it in. So the great thing about this is because it's a slow rise, so this rises after we're done for a minimum 18 hours, you don't need to proof the yeast. So you don't need to get it into some warm water and whatnot and proof it. You don't need to do that. Just whack it straight in. And now I just have 3 cups of room temp water. Now room temp does not actually mean room temp. So if it's 15 degrees inside, which is, you know, it's cool today, you don't have that at 15 degrees. Room temp is around your 24, 23 degrees. But again, this bread is pretty forgiving. It's not super important. So all the dry ingredients are there. Just 3 cups of water in. I don't have a wooden spoon at home, so that's not going to work. But usually when I make bread anyway, I always use basically the handle of whatever I'm using to mix. And then we just mix that all up. Now, if you do happen to make this bread, you will notice that the dough itself is very sticky and very runny. Now, you want it that way. So when I first made it the first time, I thought, oh, that's way too runny, and I added more flour to it. It totally ruined the bread. So it is a quite sticky bread. See how it is there now is actually, you probably can't see that real well. I have to set up on a tripod. That's actually probably a little too firm, a little too dough-like. So usually it is quite runny. So I'm actually going to put a little bit more water in there. Perhaps my measuring was a little bit dicey. So definitely don't add more flour to the recipe. Now this water is probably a little bit cool, but we'll run with that. Like, the bread is pretty forgiving, so I won't stress too much about it. So like I said, the great thing about this is it can just be, you can mix all your dry ingredients. Say if you're going camping for the weekend, you can mix all your dry ingredients in a bag, and all you need to do is just whack it into whatever you're going to mix it up in, a bowl or anything, and then just add your water, mix it up, and you're good to go. there's no fluffing around doing anything else. Alright, so that there is kind of how we want it. So it's quite runny. It's quite a runny dough. It's not firm like a regular dough would be. That's how we want it. So now, once you get to this stage, you're pretty much done. So now we just need to wrap that up and let this sit for a minimum, and yes, this is a minimum 18 hours. So we don't want to try to do anything with this less than 18 hours. I've actually found that you get the best results with it at about the 24-hour mark. So that's probably what I'll try to do. So for now, that's it. So there's your bread dough, all done. I'm going to wrap that up. I will cover it, just with cling wrap, and see you back in 24 hours. So we'll finish baking it.
Morning vlog. Alright, so I'm building a fire now so we can start baking this bread this morning. So if you use a Dutch oven or a camp oven, campfire to baking, or do anything in the Dutch oven really, so you need to make sure that you leave enough room in your fire. This is why I made this quite big. So this fire pit here is a fair size. And I did this so, well, you seen yesterday making the roast lamb leg, like enough room to have, 2 fires either side. But then when you're doing stuff like this, there's enough room for you to make a fire to create your coals to do your Dutch oven cooking, and then ample enough room to then make your coal bed there and do your cooking a fair distance away from the fire, because if you're too close to that, you'll get one side of it burns. But at the moment, we're just making the fire, and for things with a Dutch oven, especially with baking and roasting, you don't really care much about flames. We're just trying to get some coals. So I need to get a fairly decent fire going here so I can get some coals, and then we'll start baking. It's a little bit rainy today. If you can really see it, there's a little bit of a shower starting to come out there. Alright, so our fire's kind of cranking along nicely here for our bread. The mist is starting to come in around us a little bit, but that's not going to bother the fire at all, unless it really starts to... You probably can't see it in the video, but there is starting to get a few little droplets coming down, but again, that shouldn't bother us too much. So what we are going to start doing is we're going to start preheating your Dutch oven. So just like you would a regular oven, before you cook, you got to kind of preheat it. This isn't super important, but I do it. I feel like it makes the bread a bit crispier. So to do it properly, what you would do is, if it is an important step with what you're making, you drag some of the coals out, make a bed, and then sit your Dutch oven down on the bed. I don't usually bother, especially for bread. I just usually sit him close there, just like so, and then you just rotate him around every now and again just to start preheating that oven. I feel that gets it more than hot enough for bread. So we are starting to get a fair old fire happening there. What I'll do is I'll keep that fire going. So once I get a bit of coals there, when I start to actually bake, I'll drag some coals across to do the first stage of baking. Because I'm using quite a big Dutch oven, and it's quite a big loaf of bread, I may need to go in for a second lot, so I'll keep this fire going so I can get some another lot. But if you're using a smaller, like this was double batch of bread, if you're using a single batch, which just goes in your little Dutch oven there, you wouldn't, well, I've never had to do it before, just one lot of coals should do the whole bake just fine.
Alrighty, so now it's time to start baking our bread. So this is the hardest part. So you can see our bread's risen quite a lot, but like I was saying yesterday, it's quite, it's very wet. It's quite a wet, jiggly mix. So this is the hardest part. So just get some plain flour and sprinkle over the top. Now if you've got a bowl, a big bowl would make this a lot easier than using your pot. But that's what we've got. So lay out a couple sheets of baking paper on your table. If you're just using a smaller batch, like if you're making a single batch rather than a double like this, you'll get by with one, but I've got two. And just make sure that your hands are well floured.
Now, unlike other bread where you kind of shape the bread into a dough, into a ball rather, I don't usually bother with this because it's just so floppy. And you know, like the reason we've let this rise for 24 hours is to get nice big air bubbles in there, so we don't want to overwork the dough too much and get all that air out because we're not going to do a second rise. So then we just get in with your hand and just loosen up the bread around the edges. And then we're basically just going to plop it down onto here. Just in one big plop. Like so. Now if it spills out and whatnot, it doesn't matter, because this is where we need to act relatively quick. So we've got our preheated Dutch oven here. In the baking paper as well, it helps stop it sticking and burning to the bottom of the Dutch oven. Then we're just going to pick this up, which is the hardest part. And straight down into your Dutch oven. Lid on. Right, let's go and start baking. Right, so now we just want to grab some coals from the fire. So we've got a nice big coal bed there. So just scoop some up, move it a fair distance away because you don't want too much heat burning one side of your Dutch oven. And if you were smarter, you'd use a bigger shovel and a longer shovel than what I'm using. Now, it's very easy to burn the bottom, so I don't put a whole lot of coals on the bottom. I just find it burns quite easily. I'm just gonna whack that on there. That doesn't have to be all the way down. And then we're just gonna shovel some more coals, ow, on top. You pick up a bit of ash, but it doesn't really matter. And if you're wondering what temperature you're trying to get this at, hot but not too hot. That's the temperature. And there we go. I usually try to get a fair bit on top, just so we get that nice golden kind of crust on top. There we go. We'll start baking. Now, like I said, if you're making a single batch, that'll be enough. If you're making a double batch like I am, you might need a second set of coals through the bake. So we'll just mount this back up, and then we'll just whack a couple more pieces of timber on, just so we can keep that fire going. So if we need more coals, there's some nice fresh hot coals there for us. So we bake that for about half an hour, and then we'll check it. So if you make your single batch, so there's 3 cups of flour, after about half hour, that should be pretty much done. Making a double batch like this usually needs another 20 minutes or so. So we'll let that bake for half an hour, and we'll check it and see where we're at. Yeah, so this is going to be our first peek of the bread after about half an hour. So it should be starting to cook, but maybe not all the way done. You got to be careful when you do this, try not to get ash all through your bread. Yep, starting to cook. It's looking good. Now we just need to see how hot it is. That's still pretty hot, so I don't know if... I might put a little... I'll just lift this off, and I'll put a little more underneath, and I'll put a little more on top, but I won't go too crazy, because you don't want to burn it. It's very easy to burn, especially when you're doing like this. But yeah, I think I might just tickle it up a little bit. There you go. So I've just added some extra coals down the bottom and just redone the ones on top. You can see they're nice and hot. And I'll let this fire burn out now. I shouldn't need any more than what's on there. So by the looks of that bread, probably, I don't know, another 20 minutes or so. Should be getting pretty close to cooked. Alright, so it's had about another 20 minutes. I can already smell that perhaps I may have overdone it. I think might be a touch bit burnt underneath. If you are going to ever do anything with Dutch oven, make sure you get one of these. It just makes life so much easier. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Should actually have a little bit longer, actually. I'm going to put that in. I won't probably heat it anymore. Just put a little bit more on top, maybe, but it's already kind of too hot on the bottom. I can see a little bit of smoke there, but that is just part and parcel of cooking on a Dutch oven. There's no way of not burning things. I'll just put the last of those coals on top. Give it another, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, and that'll be it. Now for the final check of the bread. I reckon it should be pretty well done now. Yeah, that is perfect. In fact, I may have even overcooked it a little bit now. But that is beautiful. And there we have it. There is our finished bread. Turned out good. So this is it's quite a crusty bread. It's almost, you would say it's a cross between like bread and a crumpet. Like, that's kind of how it tastes. It did get a little bit burnt, like I said. I was probably just that one patch there, but that's not too bad. I think I was probably wrong putting that second lot of coals underneath there. I probably just should have left it. But otherwise, that's our bread, and it is beautiful.